Bok, ja sam Koen, and today I'm going to review the entry of Croatia at Eurovision 2023, Letri, with the song Mamašć. Croatia picked their Eurovision entry this year with the national final Dora again. Damir Keccio, who won Dora in 2020 but didn't go to Eurovision because Eurovision 2020 was cancelled and he was not internally reselected to represent Croatia in 2021. Neither did he participate in Dora 2021 to participate again. He did participate in the national final this year with the song Angels and Demons, but he ended on the 5th place. He is the third Eurovision 2020 artist who tried to represent their country again this year but did not manage to. One of the big favorites to win the national final this year before the live show were Harmonia Dissonant with the song Nevera Lele. It was also my personal favorite before the show, but the live performance was kind of a disaster. It kind of looked like a high school performance with the way they were performing, and there wasn't really a stage presence, and there was a bit of a choreography, but it wasn't really executed that well. It really just reminded me of a high school performance. Also, the vocals weren't really always that great. They still ended up on the 2nd place though. The eventual winner of the national final was the in 1980 formed shock rock group Letri with the song Mamašć. This band is known for its pretty controversial and obscene performances. Take their album Nečuveno, for example. This album or CD was sold with nothing on it. It was just a plastic disc being distributed, which is fitting because Nečuveno means something along the lines of unheard of. Their next album they did release but only had one copy, which the band members refused to actually distribute. They later did release the album, but they released 3 slightly different versions of the album.
Well, almost. The band didn't release slightly different versions of the album, but the record company did. And as a protest, the band staged a fake suicide by firing squad on Banja Luka Square,
which is the central square of the Croatian capital Zagreb. They did that in the year 2000, and in that same year, they also revealed a statue named Babin Kurac, which means grandma's... Well, just look at the picture, you know what the next word is. They also often use sexuality in their performances. They, for example, often perform wearing nothing but muzzles, and they don't wear them on their face, if you know what I mean. They even once got kicked out of a talk show because their behavior was deemed inappropriate by the TV show host, because the band members were simulating the ejection of corks from their rectums. So I guess you could say they are pretty controversial, to say the least. And their shock value performances also really makes them a certified shock rock band, I guess. The band members have also voiced their support for rights such as women's rights and LGBTQ+ rights, and they've also taken a vocal stance against the Catholic Church and against conservative politics. The band members of Letri have claimed that their song Mamašć is basically mocking dictators for their childish behavior, and they are particularly aiming at the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, with lyrics like "Mom, I'm going to play, Mom, I'm going to war." The phrase "Mom bought a tractor" is a reference to Lukashenko gifting Vladimir Putin a tractor for his 70th birthday. And throughout the song, dictators are basically being called psychopaths. The whole alphabet is also part of the lyrics, ending with the letter Z, which is what the sh of the song could also be referring to, because the letter Z is a symbol that's being used on Russian military armed forces. Now, I don't know if this is actually confirmed by the band, but it's being heavily speculated in the Eurofandom. The band also talked about the letters in an interview, in which they said, after a total Armageddon has been waged on Earth, a rocket with the letters sh will land on Earth. Though they also explained that the letters could stand for the sound someone makes during orgasm, could stand for a blood group, or for the sound someone makes while meditating. And they've also said that sh is the oldest letter in the alphabet, going back thousands of years. So I guess you could say that there are a lot of meanings behind the sh part. The man on stage carrying the 2 bombs during national final performance has Ninle written on his forehead, which means Lenin in Satrovački, which is a Serbo-Croatian language. I gotta say, I didn't really get this song at first in the performance because I just went into watching this performance without knowing anything about it. But after doing some research to this entry, I realized that this is probably the, or at least one of the entries this year with the most thought behind it. Like, there's a lot of thought that went into this whole concept, which you wouldn't really expect looking at this performance, in my opinion. I think the references are well thought out, and it could obviously be interpreted in multiple different ways, as you can see in the fandom, and by the way that the band Letri explains, for example, the meaning of stu. I'm just not too sure how well it will translate to the Eurovision audience. I also know that a lot of people were not happy with the winners of the national final Letri. Some people were even offended by the performance, I mean, which I kind of get because they are dressed as dictators, but I think it's pretty obvious that they are mocking dictators. It also took quite a while until they were officially confirmed as the Croatian Eurovision act of this year, which led to a lot of people thinking they were being disqualified for being too political, which is also something people thought about the Czech entry, because it also took quite a while until they were finally confirmed as the Eurovision entry for Czechia. But in the case of Croatia, a lot of people were actually hoping for Letri to be disqualified, in the contrary to Czechia, when a lot of people were hoping that Vesna would not be disqualified. So I think it was pretty weird to see that contrast of two entries being chosen one after another, both having discussions about being too political, but one entry was so loved by the fandom and people really wanted them to be confirmed, and the other one, people just really wanted to be disqualified. Like, you could already see people being happy about them being disqualified before there were even talks about them being disqualified. At least serious talks. There were some rumors, of course, but rumors are rumors. Which is so weird when you look at the entry that won their national final right before Croatia was so loved and people were scared of it being disqualified for being too political. Which I think is so weird, because when you look at the lyrics of Mamac and maybe do some research to like what's the meaning behind this entry, it's obviously very anti-war and mocking dictators. So it was kind of weird to me seeing that shift in the fandom, for people wanting a political song to not be disqualified to people wanting another political song, or at least also a song with a political message, to be disqualified. I think it was a weird shift. Anyway, like I said, I'm not too sure how well this song will translate to the Eurovision audience. I also have my doubts about Serbia last year, since Serbia's entry also had a deep meaning behind it, but since it was fully sung in Serbian and also Latin, I wasn't really that sure how well it would translate to the audience, also because the performance was pretty contemporary. But in the end, Serbia was the fourth favorite of the televotes last year, which I think was mostly because of the hand clapping and the washing the hands and the Biti Zdrava part, which I think people just thought were really catchy and wasn't necessarily because of the message behind it. And I think Croatia's entry does not really have that, at least not as much as Serbia did last year, though they have some phrases which are being repeated the whole time and which are catchy or could be catchy or could be memorable to televoters. I'm not too sure if it's catchy enough to look past the bizarreness of this performance for some people. I don't know how much it'll change the performance for Eurovision, because I'm not too sure if they'll actually be allowed to also dress as dictators on the Eurovision stage or carry those rockets or bombs on the Eurovision stage. I could see the EBU maybe not wanting that, because it could also stir some controversy in the Eurovision audience. I've seen lots of people saying that Croatia is a guaranteed qualifier this year, since the semifinals are decided by televoting only and not by the jury votes. And I gotta say that I do think that the fact that there are no juries in the semifinals this year makes Croatia have more of a chance at qualifying this year, as in previous year when juries did have a say in the semifinal qualifiers. But I don't think they are a guaranteed qualifier just yet. I feel like a lot of Eurofans think an entry is weird or bizarre, so televoters will like this, but then seem to forget about previous televote only semifinals with some weird or televote friendly entries, which are also kind of bizarre. Like, from the top of my head, Ireland 2008 or Denmark 2007, those seem like pretty televote friendly entries, I think, but they didn't qualify either, just to name two. Though Croatia is in a pretty advantageous spot in the semifinal running order this year. They're in the first semifinal, which is the strong semifinal this year, which is also, you know, kind of why I'm not too sure if Croatia will qualify, but they do stand out. You can't say they don't stand out, because there's not one entry like Croatia's entry at this year's Eurovision Song Contest. And then if you look at the running order, Croatia is sandwiched between Ireland and Switzerland, and I think Croatia does stand out between the two of them. So that's pretty advantageous. So I don't think Croatia is a guaranteed qualifier just yet, but I do see why people are saying that they are, because I do get the thought behind it, like it's a televote friendly entry. And I do definitely think that Croatia has a chance qualifying this year. I just don't think they're a guaranteed qualifier just yet. But usually when I have doubts like this about an entry and about the message maybe not being that clear to the Eurovision audience, they do pretty well in the televoting. So right now I'm just going to say that they'll probably qualify, but I'm saying that with a tiny asterisk behind it. So to conclude, even though Croatia's entry this year seems to be pretty weird and bizarre, there's actually quite a lot of thought behind the lyrics and the concept of this entry, and it's pretty well thought out. I think Croatia definitely has a chance at qualifying, because the fact that the juries aren't deciding the semifinal qualifiers this year is advantageous for them, but I'm just not 100% convinced just yet. And that's about all for now. What do you think of my message? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you liked this video, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully until next time. Look.